And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 100th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 437th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, November 8th, 2018. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred in the second half of Indiana's season-opening victory over Chicago State. Rob Phinisee, who has a reputation for being smart with the basketball, threw a terrible telegraphed bounce pass that was picked off by a Chicago State defender. Chicago State then tried to turn its defense into offense and get going in transition, but it wasn't meant to be. Why? Because Rob hustled back and made an athletic interception of his own, snatching possession of the ball right back for Indiana with no damage done. And what I loved about this play was the instinct for mental toughness that it showed. A lot of young players, heck, even a lot of older players, might have sulked after such a poor turnover, especially in a game that was already decided and entering silly time. Or they might simply have turned and run back on defense, simply with the idea of kind of just getting back on defense. But Rob immediately turned and ran to make a play. And he did. It was an athletic one. He looked like a cornerback making up ground and intercepting an underthrown pass. And it is this combination of mental toughness, basketball IQ, and athletic ability that is making Rob stand out so early in his freshman season. That's a great sign for a guy who seems destined to become one of this program's on-court leaders, perhaps even as soon as this season. Okay, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Mike Budenholzer of Girls Youth Sports Coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and one of the nation's most respected bracketologists. This despite having LSU projected one seed line higher than Indiana in his preseason bracketology.
I can be bought, I guess is what I'm saying.
He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your Bottoms line from the last week in IU basketball?
Well, a 1-0 start is certainly better than the 0-1 start from a season ago. We kind of touched on that. I think glossed over it for the better part of the Chicago State post-game show. But certainly a 49-point victory is a far better way to start the season off than what we saw a year ago. And for me now, it's the season starts to become a puzzle where you're trying to learn a little bit more and put a little bit put a few more pieces in each given week. And so I think about where we are now. You've seen an exhibition game in the Chicago State game, and we're starting to figure out a few things of some things we thought about the team going into the season that may have been reaffirmed, some other things we might be revisiting. And if you think about a week from now, they'll have that Marquette game under their belt, the first real test of the season, and I think that'll be a game that we'll learn quite a bit more, not only about how good this team really can be defensively, how far ahead of the offense the defense really is against a really talented Marquette team, but also a better idea of who's going to really be in the rotation, which will certainly tighten up by then. And so, we're, just one game into what we hope is going to be a really long season, but it's just kind of interesting to see the little bits and pieces that we'll pick up along the way. And I think we'll know a lot more in a week even than we do right now.
And to my right, no, unfortunately, it is not Ryan Phillips, who has been stricken by a wicked case of food poisoning.
Ryan had a good night.
No, Megan, I don't think he did. I won't read you the graphic text that Andy and I have received, but suffice it to say,
that's not a great situation.
Now, here's the real question. Is it a coincidence that Duke had one of its most dominant performances ever, and soon after, Ryan gets food poisoning? Now, all joking aside, we wish Ryan a speedy recovery. He's been working his butt off lately, and we all know that this show is never quite the same without him. But here to replace him is our trusty fourth man. He is the longtime high school basketball coach, or a longtime high school basketball coach in Indiana, the host of Sports Talk with Tonsoni, the founder of the Delphi Bracketology Club, and the president of the Archie Miller Fan Club.
Look at me, I'm Archie Miller. I really, really like Archie Miller. I have a mad crush on Archie Miller, and I trust Archie.
Thank you.
He is the coach, Brian Tonsoni, and that means it's Tonsoni time. Coach, what's on your mind?
Well, we didn't have much tomfoolery going on in the early part of the season like we did last year. So that's my main thought, that it's very nice to get a win and be 1-0 on the season instead of reeling like last year. And in all seriousness, to add to the crush that I have on Archie Miller. You win by 49, hold a team to a really good defensive efficiency, and you're upset with the defensive intensity and focus in the post-game press conference. So, and here's something to defend Ryan with Duke too. And I know this is going to be ridiculous because everyone's talking about how good that program is after one win. I'd rather have a team that defends and I might have an off night offensively once in a while because defense keeps you in games and wins Big Ten tournament games and NCAA tournament teams. Teams who don't defend but outscore people with talented, they can have an off night. Even talented guys can have an off night. And that's when teams like Duke are going to get beat because they don't coach any defense. So, Ryan, I'm taking care of you. I'm going to stick on the Duke train there. But it's IU basketball, and tonight's about IU basketball. Another home opener tomorrow. We're going to talk about what we're looking forward to, or another home game, what we're looking forward to. It's just fun to see a good result, even though the opponent was Chicago State, with three guys that you were counting on being in the rotation, not being in the rotation, and that really didn't alter. As you're seeing results come through, the chat mob's talking about a Louisville score and a Notre Dame score. Indiana didn't have that, and hopefully that continues right up until Marquette.
All right, here's what we are going to talk about this week. We will each talk about the biggest thing that we're going to be watching for in the Montana State game coming up on Friday. We'll talk about what we've learned, if anything, about Indiana's guard rotation, and then some important perspective on the recent announcement by Trayce Jackson-Davis that he will wait until the spring to commit. We will talk about that, and then we will answer some of your questions. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. But first, I am very excited to introduce our newest sponsor, Comfort Option, and they will be with us all season as a sponsor here on Assembly Call Radio. And in future spots, I will tell you all about their revolutionary mattress store to your door product. But before we get into all of that, there are a few things that you need to know about Comfort Option as a company. They are an Indiana-based mattress manufacturer. They are backed by over 65 years of experience, and they are family-owned and operated by third-generation graduates of IU. And then there's this, which is clearly the most important thing you need to know about Comfort Option and why we're so excited to have them as a sponsor. Nathan Elliott, whose granddad founded the company, is Comfort Option's chief marketing officer. He is the person who originally reached out to me about pursuing a partnership with the Assembly Call. Well, he counts among his most prized possessions an autographed picture of Calbert Chaney that Calbert mailed to Nathan after his parents had sent Calbert a drawing that the then 7-year-old Nathan had made of his favorite Hoosier. So yeah, in other words, these are our kinds of people. They bleed cream and crimson just like you and me, and they also happen to produce a fantastic mattress product, which gets 5-star reviews everywhere you look online. Again, I will tell you more about Comfort Option's products in future episodes. For now, if you're curious, visit comfortoption.com to learn more.
Can a brother get some coupons?
And yes, if you decide to buy a mattress, make sure that you use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout to get a $50 discount on your mattress purchase. That's comfortoption.com, promo code ASSEMBLY for $50 off mattresses.
Thank you.
Okay, so guys, let's talk about this Montana State game that is coming up on Friday. And Andy, I will go to you first. You know, Montana State, they're obviously not quite as bad as Chicago State, but they're down there in the 260s, the 270s in Ken Palm, so I don't think anybody really expects this to be a competitive game. The Ken Palm prediction, I think, is about a 24-point victory for Indiana. But given what we've seen now through one exhibition game and one regular season game without playing much competition, what is kind of the biggest thing that you're going to be looking for in this game against Montana State?
Well, I tend to gravitate more toward the defensive end because Montana State did not come in with a, defensively, their efficiency numbers were pretty poor last year. And, one game in, they gave up 100 points and 1.3 points per possession to Utah State. So I don't think scoring is going to be an issue. So for me, IU's been really good in the Southern Indiana game and in the Chicago State game at forcing turnovers and coming in. This is a team that, the current, Ken Palm, some of the, trying to work out some of the preseason projections, but the last couple of years, Montana State's been pretty good at taking care of the basketball, has had low turnover rates. Their better players are a pair of guards. So to me, kind of Coach alluded to this a little bit of, the defense is, if you can make that your calling card that you're always going to, be known for and that you can count on night in and night out, this game will go a little bit toward saying just how good this team can be defensively. And so if they can continue to force turnovers, which has gotten them some transition buckets in the exhibition game, the Chicago State game, I think that'll continue to be a positive. We see that, really be something that you can hang your hat on as a fan and know what's coming up. So this will be another test in that regard. Like I said, I struggle to come up with anything offensively that really, would fit the bill here, but I think it's, continuing what they've started out doing defensively. Coach,
biggest thing you're looking for against Montana State?
I think both of you guys are going to hit the defensive side, and I probably would too, being a defensive-minded coach. And I would say the one aspect, which isn't maybe the biggest thing, I'll let you, Jerod, talk about some other things that I agree with, is players learning to play great defense without fouling. I think that we saw Rob get in foul trouble the other night. He had to sit for a part of the first half, and Archie went against what he normally does, did bring him back. I wonder if that was just because it was Chicago State or some things like that. Rob seemed to handle playing with fouls. That is something we talk about as coaches a lot. When you have 2 fouls or you have 3 or 4 at some point in the game, do you know how to keep competing at a high level without fouling and being smart about taking fouls and not silly fouls? So I would be looking for that. Offensively, it'll be interesting. I haven't seen a scouting report on Montana State to see if they play zone, man, whatever. But I'd like to see the offense getting a little bit of a flow when they're not out running in transition, because that's going to obviously need to be a key component of that. And I just got a chance to watch the first half on tape because of coaching duties. But Juwan Morgan's got to get going at some point offensively, I think, earlier than he has. You mentioned on the postgame show you thought that he did not have a great game. So I will look at, if we're looking offensively, what's the flow look like? Can we get some stuff in the half court? Can we get Juwan going a little bit earlier than what we have in the first couple of games that we've seen?
Yeah, I would say the one thing for me offensively that I would like to see, I mean, there's several things, but I think the main thing is Devonte Green's shot selection. And I thought he did some nice things, his first time out. And you have to remember he was injured. He did some nice things, played pretty well defensively, but he was really kind of hunting shots. And I think at times last year he needed to do that because we didn't have playmakers offensively. He does not need to do that this year. And as we're going to talk about, in the next segment, that's one of the things that, you start talking about the difference between he and Rob and who might be a better fit when you have Romeo and Juwan and other scorers out there. That's something where, maybe it's just going to take Devonte a little bit of time to remember that he's got all these playmakers around him. So I'm not overreacting to that at all. It's just something that I would like to see and see if that changes once he's had a game under his belt. And then, to me, it's about the defense. Coach, you talked about how Archie was disappointed in the postgame press conference. I always like to see when a coach has made something a key, and he's clearly talked about it in a post-game press conference, or he talks about it, on the pregame show and said it was something they focused on this week. I always like to see if the team goes out there and executes it, because that shows a team and a coach that are on the same page. And when you don't see that, you don't overreact to it happening one time, but if that becomes a pattern, you really start to question the connection between coach and team. So I think that'll be a real interesting early indication of how connected Archie is with this group if they come out and really play 30 to 35 minutes of really, really strong defense. Anything can happen those final minutes of of what we expect to be a blowout game. But if they really come out with that defensive intensity, that's what I want to see. All right, coming up on this edition of the Assembly Call, we're going to discuss Indiana's guard rotation, especially as it relates to Devonte and Rob, and what we have and haven't learned about it through 2 games against vastly inferior competition. That is next on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. All right. We all apologize that none of us have Ryan's dance moves for the intro and outro music. Coach has promised to try. There you go. Dang it. I forgot to turn the gallery view on, so we're all on the screen. Let me do that right now. Okay, there we are. So welcome to everybody who's watching live. Awesome to see you all here. One thing I'm very excited about tonight, we have another Chat Mob induction, and we are inducting Valerie Elliott into the Chat Mob. Very excited about this. She is here. She's actually here in the Zoom little window with us right now. So she'll be joining us after the show to talk a little bit about her IU basketball experience, her experience with the show. What I want to say real quick about Valerie, because she's, the things to me that really come to mind are just the consistent support and so many of the thoughtful emails that she has sent us, just being supportive and sending kind words and letting us know how much the show means to her. That's the thing. There are a lot of members of the Chat Mob that are in there and very active and very vocal at all times. She's not always able to be in the chat because she's at games or has other things going on. But when she is there, she participates, and even when she's not, she's just been so supportive of us, and just the spontaneous acts of kindness, like the autographed Juwan Morgan magazine that she sent me after Hoosier Hysteria, which was just incredibly kind. So Valerie's awesome, and we're going to talk with her after the show, after segment number 4. So we're very excited about that. Okay, and everybody send tweets of kindness and support to Ryan as he suffers through some difficulties, which it's not funny, but
This was the most ridiculous ordeal of my life.
Okay. We do feel bad for him. All right, you guys ready for segment number 2?
I mean, you're really supposed to be the nice one out of all of us, so I'm really struggling.
Well,
if you're unable to really handle this any better than you are already.
In AC, simply call no empathy tonight.
No, I feel bad for him, but the text that he sent us it makes me laugh thinking about it. Just some of the wording that he used. Not going to read it. I'm not, that would be disrespectful, but Judd knows we do feel bad for him. Look, the other coincidence, I'm just going to say, last Thursday he came on here and he had some very, very critical comments about his mother and his family. I'm just saying, maybe, the next Thursday comes around, maybe there's a little karma at play. Just saying. Just saying.
He could have used his phone from a outlying region if he had to, if he was that sick.
Okay. All right. Enough about that. Let's talk basketball. Okay. I'll kick it to Coach. I'll kick it to you first on this one, since we talked about this a little bit on the post-game show, and then Andy hop in.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, here we go. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts,
chat mobbers,
or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel. You will be privy to all of the between segment banner that doesn't make it into the radio show or podcast edit, like the time Ryan openly mocked his kind, wonderful mother on the air.
Held you in my womb for 9 months.
Mm-hmm. Join us live at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Jerod Morris, here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Coach Tonsoni. And guys, let's talk about what has kind of felt like the most, common conversation topic among IU fans after the game. And that is Devonte Green and Rob Phinisee. And I think it's really important to state right off the bat, as we start talking about impressions that we've made from an exhibition game and a glorified exhibition game, that, number one, we haven't seen a whole lot of Al Durham yet and what that's going to kind of mean for the rotation. A lot of guys have been injured, so we haven't, seen the first 8-9 guys as they would kind of normally be playing together. And let's remember how bad the competition has been, and just to give you a little bit of perspective about the kind of crazy performances that can happen during these early games against really bad teams. In 2014, we played Chicago State in the opener, and Jeremy Hollowell scored 16 points and had 4 block shots. In 2015, we played Mississippi Valley State, and Max Hotzel, who would later become Max Montana, had 19 points and 9 rebounds. So big performances in the first game of the season, they're not always harbingers of big performances to come, all right? And the offense is still clearly finding a rhythm. That said, I think we all feel pretty comfortable that we've seen some things from Rob Phinisee that, no matter the competition, are going to translate to when the competition starts to get a little bit better. And while we've only seen Devonte Green for 1 game, we also have 2 years of experience with him. And so I think it's fair to at least, kind of build some impressions from what we've seen, and start to discuss what that may mean for the offense moving forward. So, Coach, what have kind of been your thoughts so far? We know your affection for Rob Phinisee. You coached against him last year in high school. What have you kind of seen in terms of fit from him, and how do you see the two of them fitting together, or kind of how their roles might settle in moving forward?
Well, it's going to be an interesting battle to watch because the experience goes to Devonte Green. We know he can play that position. We've heard that he had a good offseason. But then the next man up when he was injured, when you have competitive talent behind you and they come into play, injuries shouldn't cost you a position. But if that substitute comes in and plays really well, I thought John Crispin on the podcast today, Podcast on the Brink, was really excellent about trust. And I can't emphasize that enough as a coach in basketball. If you have a point guard that you can trust, I call it being a coach out on the floor that knows what side of the floor to take it to, where the shooters are, who is trying to get things done for the team before themselves. That just increases that level of trust. And when I heard that today on the way drive over to practice, that's the biggest thing that, he said that he didn't feel that Devonte had that same level of trust as Phinisee, even after just 1 or 2 games. I don't know that I'm ready to say that yet. It could just be that they wanted to bring Devonte in after the injury, but that's something to watch. And it is. You trust players, and sometimes it's not the best player, the player who can make the fanciest moves or hit the most shots, but it's about execution offensively and defensively, and a lot of things that fans may not see or don't show up in the box score that's running while the game goes on. You as a coach just love those players, and that's how some offensively challenged players get on the court, because they can execute defensively and offensively. And I just think Rob is that point guard. Andy said it, I believe, on the post-game show about he just is a point guard in the way of running an offense and then scoring. And Devonte's just others, and many people probably have said that. And but I think Rob is going to be a solid player for a long time, and I think he's showing that, even though the competition hasn't been outstanding. And that is something to see. I thought it would happen, but I didn't think it would happen this early. I thought it would take some grooming time, and he'll have a game or two where he'll struggle, but it sure is making the seat hot for Devonte, Rob's play.
Yeah.
I thought the other thing that John Christmas said on the same podcast was it was something to the effect of, Devonte kind of drives looking to score or does things on the floor that move in the direction of creating scoring opportunities for himself, versus Phinisee seems very natural at trying to make something happen for other players. And I think that probably plays into that trust factor a little bit. Also, I think can just be, I'm going to say predictable, and I don't know, probably maybe that's too strong a word, but I think when Phinisee has it, because he's, very much doing stuff from, in the flow of the offense and just trying to kind of run things, like there's a consistency factor to where he's going to be, what he's going to do, where I, as another player on the floor with him, need to be, and where I need to position myself, knowing how he plays, versus Devonte, who's a little more freewheeling and does some of those kinds of things where it's like, I don't really know where I need to be as a player complementing that person on the floor. So I think there's a little bit of that. And, both of those skill sets are valuable at different times and in different situations. And I think that's one of the reasons that, you kind of brought up, can they play together, because they really, the yin and the yang, can they really, kind of coexist and balance each other out a little bit. But it's a pretty stark contrast when you look at those guys on the floor. And I think that's what, I think I used the term like polarizing the other night. I think it becomes really, as much as you're like, well, where are these 2 games in? It's like, no, and now everybody's like, no, we need to take sides now and figure out who's going to be the guy. I don't necessarily think that's true, but I do think it for those who view the point guard position as being played in a certain way, the guy that you envision in your mind is probably Rob Phinisee. And for those who like a different style of basketball, it's Devonte. But I think you're, I just think there's such a contrast. It makes it an interesting debate. And I think it's one of those things where in games that haven't been very close, you're kind of looking for something, not necessarily like controversial to talk about, but there's like, what can you really take away from these games, the scoring margins? But I can take away, like, this is a really important position for this team. And watching the 2 of them play, how does everybody think it plays out best?
I'll settle for mildly interesting after games like Chicago State. Doesn't even need to be controversial. Just mildly interesting will do.
Yeah, well, that's true.
You're listening to Assembly Call Radio. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. We're talking about Indiana's point guard situation. Here's the thing that I've started thinking about this. When you look at the starting lineup, when you have a Romeo and a Juwan on the floor, right? Those are the two guys that you need to play through. And when those two guys are out there, it feels like, and we're going to have to see this all play out, but it feels like a guy with Rob's skill set, even if you just kind of remove the names and who they are, but just his skill set and his propensity on the floor might be a better fit with those guys. Now, we know Devonte can be a spark plug. He can be a scorer. And there's definitely a place for that on this team. It could end up being that he's better served being a guy on a second unit, that when Romeo or Juwan go to the bench, he's now a guy who kind of moves up the pecking order in terms of your offensive options. And he can be a little bit more free to do the stuff he's good at. Like, I think the problem we run into with Devonte is he does have some really good natural skills and he's got some instincts. And it's like we're always telling him, no, Devonte, don't do that. No, don't do that. But it's like how he naturally plays the game. So I feel like if there's a way, because of what Rob brings to the table, if that can help, maybe minimize some of the situations where Devonte's instincts get him in trouble, but he can be put in situations where you accentuate the positives he brings to the table, maybe that can be a benefit for everybody. Now, easy for me to say. I'm not the guy who was pegged as a starting point guard who would lose my job in that situation, have to accept a new role. But you kind of look at it from 30,000 feet, and I wonder if that couldn't be better in the big picture for the entire team. And Coach, you can comment on that and also on how hard that might be for Archie to try and sell to a guy like Devonte, who all offseason we were talking about as a point guard and who still may end up being that guy as we go forward.
Sometimes it's very difficult for coaches to put players in positions of need because you need them, but that's not their natural ability. And Devonte may be a better two guard, and he may be better with Rob out there at the point and go a little bit smaller lineup or coming in for Romeo and mixing it up a little bit. And we'll see what Archie can come up with, but there is a role, and it's coaches got to sell roles, and it's not easy, and you got to do it every day. Talk about team. But Vinnie Johnson comes to mind of the old Detroit Pistons. Probably most of our chat mobbers and everyone listening don't even know who Vinnie Johnson.
The microwave.
Microwave.
If people don't know, I don't want to hear about it because that's going to make me feel really old. So if you don't know, just play along, act like you do, and let's move on.
But come off the bench and light it up and be a slasher. He could be a slasher where he can make his moves his shot. So again, coaches have to put people in position to succeed. Sometimes that doesn't match up with the player and the player's family and all of that. And that's just stuff you have to deal with. But it could very well be that Devonte is really going to help this team and may even play better off the ball. Or on the ball as a backup player with a different mix. I like that idea quite a bit, and that's what you'll see with depth. You can mix and match as needed for a variety of teams.
And look, that only works if Rob is up to the challenge against better competition, and we don't know that yet. We're extrapolating from games against inferior competition that we've seen. But anyway, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, well, I think the easiest thing to do here, which these are not player comps. So if Ryan is listening, I want to be clear that's not what these are. But you try to think back to kind of Coach's example of Vinnie Johnson. But for me, it's trying to think of other IU players who maybe were miscast at a various point. So the guy that immediately comes to mind is Verdell Jones. All the stuff that he got asked to do early in his IU career was stuff that he was asked to do out of necessity on those teams, but really became a guy, like you said, that was, you sit here as fans, and I do it. Devonte takes a pull-up three from the top of the key up 15, and you're like, no, stop doing that. You know what I mean? But it's, is he being asked to do something by playing the point that maybe is not in his best interest? And I thought that happened a lot with Verdell Jones. And then you see a guy really try to figure out like what his niche is eventually over the course of his career. And the guy that comes to mind there is a Troy Williams, who really started to figure out, hey, certainly these guys are different positions, but I can really, make things difficult for defenses by making hard cuts on the baseline. He eventually developed, a bit more of a jump shot than he had before, and really kind of being a slasher and those kinds of things. So to me, yeah, it's early. I think it's a good time to start talking about those things because it's something that we can watch for again as that kind of puzzle comes together. But you certainly have seen over IU's history and others where, guys who are asked to consistently do stuff that just isn't in their DNA is probably not going to work out and just going to kind of turn people against them in some ways. And then you've got others that you can really see embrace, hey, this is how I can be successful when I have a good game, I'm doing these 1, 2, 3 things, and I'm going to go out and do those every night.
Yeah. And, and the other thing that'll be interesting too, and Coach, you mentioned this, is, kind of seeing them play together and see how that works. I know, Jay in the chat, how can you judge Rob's composure when he hasn't played a minute of basketball against a decent opponent? He got 2 quick fouls against Chicago State, and that is true. Again, we have to wait and see, but I think the reason why everybody feels comfortable kind of extrapolating that forward is, number one, his reputation in high school and what he proved over time at McCutcheon, and what you saw Coach scouting against him and coaching against him. And frankly, just what his coaches and his teammates have said about him. I don't remember many freshmen that have gotten the praise that he has gotten for his maturity and mental toughness and like all of these things that you don't usually start hearing about, and you certainly don't often hear about from a freshman. So I think that's part of it. Like, there's more here than just a normal run-of-the-mill freshman. I think there are some reasons to think that it might be real, but yes, like with anything else, you've got to see it against better competition. But I think to answer your question, Jay, I would say that is why people feel a little bit more comfortable in this case, kind of trusting that moving forward. Coach, any final thoughts on the point guard topic? And again, we all really look forward to seeing Al play, because he apparently made a lot of improvements too and is going to be in this mix big time.
A lot of times as fans, we default to returning players as the players who should be better and are experienced because of that. We trust Romeo to come in and have the composure against big teams. Rob is not Romeo, but Rob is a highly recruited guard who played some really good basketball. And it goes back to different styles of recruiting. And Rob's more of an Archie Miller guy than Devonte, in my opinion. Devonte was from the old regime, and there's always going to be that little difference of that's there. And it's got to be handled by the coach. It's got to be handled by the player. But, I think fans can – yes, we don't know. And the minute that Rob has a bad game, then everyone's going to say, yeah, he can't handle against Marquette or some other players. But it's the style of play more than it is freshman versus junior, experience versus non-experience, that I think that really excites us. And again, from a coach who knows that if your point guard can run the team, it's a lot better. And I just think Rob might be better than that in the long haul.
I think for me, I kind of mentioned in my opening comments about the Marquette game telling us a lot. Those guys are going to have to guard Marcus Howard in that game. And while he's not a great defender, they might be able to get some things done against him. For as much as Archie views defense as being an important piece of that equation, I think how they play in that game and how much they play in that game will be a lot more telling than anything we've seen so far. That'll really be our first glimpse at, is this a legitimate kind of changing of the guard or whatever you want to say there. I think that game will be the first time we can truly, hazard a guess at whether that's happening or not.
Yep. All righty, coming up, we are going to reluctantly spend an entire segment talking about recruiting, specifically Trayce Jackson-Davis, and his announcement from earlier this week. We'll offer our perspective on that. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All righty. Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think there's really good points on both sides. So it's, this is going to be an interesting topic all season, I think. Jay. Oh, go ahead.
I just say a lot of us want Devonte to be something too. Because we're better if he is a true point guard and can score and can do all those things. I was concerned a little bit. There was that tweet in the summer about coaches letting him play and not getting upset with him for mistakes and all of that kind of stuff. And remember when we did the buy-sell stuff that I kind of sold on Devonte because I was worried, can he get the message from Archie and play in a way that Archie, as a guard, as a lead guard himself, wants to play? And that was a big question mark, and that is still going to be a question mark. And for all those people who say, and rightfully so, that Rob hasn't played against competition, I'm not sure Devonte has really had a true point guard game in 2 years. We had bad point guard play at Indiana last year from all the guys who ran through the point guard. And it was every night on your guys' post-game show. And there were a couple games, and there were games where he played well, don't get me wrong, but from a true point guard that a coach wants to have to really execute things, I had the big caution sign up and still do. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that lesson has been learned.
Was that one of those echo signs? Like on the back of Don't Hop, you had caution?
Yeah, caution. And you know, that's a tough part of coaching too, because you got to make some of these decisions. You can like a kid could have a great off season, but this kid's better for what you want than this kid right now. You're going to play that kid, and if it changes, you're going to make the substitution, and that's tough.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting, and we're going to obviously we have 2 big games within the next, couple of weeks that are going to tell us a lot. So
I'm wondering if it's Rob and L at the point and Devonte playing the off guard and smaller lineups.
Could be.
It could get to that at some point too. We haven't seen L.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So let's talk recruiting.
Said with such glee.
I don't know. Talking about, the Romeo story was so big that kind of got us back into talking about recruiting. But for a long time on the show, we didn't, especially during the season, we didn't talk about recruiting until a guy committed. And and this has nothing to do, this is not the fault of Trayce Jackson-Davis at all, but just kind of the public storylines and the back channel storylines and everything about this recruitment. It's, you get to a point like that and you're like, okay, why don't we all just let him take his time and make his decision and just let us know when you've got it. It makes you feel like you wasted a whole bunch of time talking about it and reading about it and all of that stuff. So I feel like we should go back to our old way of doing this. And if another Romeo recruitment comes up, then we need to talk about it more. But if not, wait until a guy commits and then give scouting reports and actually talk about him.
From the movie Hoosiers, my team is on the floor.
Yeah.
We got 14 guys with Indiana jerseys that we need to talk about. And if Trayce Jackson-Davis likes Indiana, he'll wear one soon enough. And when he makes that decision, we can all jump up and down because I think he's going to make it eventually. We're in the final 3, My team is on the floor.
That's right.
Jay
says Steph Curry isn't a true point guard. Neither is Harden, Westbrook, Lillard. You can go on and on. What's a true point guard anymore? That is true. My only pushback there as it relates to this conversation is I think Archie wants a true point guard. At being a former point guard himself, I think he wants a guy who fits that more traditional point guard role. That's the only reason I talk about it within that context is because I feel like that's what we'll see because I think that's what Archie, not totally, not like the old days, but I still think that's kind of how he sees basketball a little bit,
I think that's true. I think it's also transcendent guys that are not the norm, nor are either one of, Phinisee or Devonte even in the zip code of where those guys would be. I mean, it's no different than having a 6'11" guy and saying well, Kevin Durant plays shooting guard. I should let the 6'11". I should have Evan Fitzner play shooting guard. You wouldn't do that. So those guys to me are just so far and away, from a talent perspective, in a different zone than those guys. So it can certainly work, but I would argue you could put those guys at whatever position you want and your team's going to be really good because they're amazing players.
If I had a point guard who played like Steph Curry, I'd let him play point guard, even though he's non-traditional. But,
in his defense, I think he's talking more kind of relative to their.
And that's that positionless basketball, too, because you'll see Romeo bring the ball up and do those things.
Yeah.
Okay. Ryan McIntosh, love the kid. True point guard.
Yep. Okay.
Maybe I'm old. I am old. I brought the average age of this show way up higher than probably the demographics of podcast world. The age of the host used to be young and vibrant, and then they had Coach on there.
Okay, here we go. Okay, you guys ready for segment 3? You have your Trayce Jackson-Davis hot takes ready? You ready to rake him over the coals and wonder why he's treating us so poorly, putting us through all of this?
Yes, dear 17-year-old kid that I've never met before.
What a jerk! Come on, man.
As a 40-year-old, let me tell you how you need to live.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm gonna start laughing in the middle of this introduction. I already know it. And it's because I'm thinking about that text Ryan sent. It has nothing to do with this topic. All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Boddens and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Remember that if you are a serious IU Hoops fan, you need to be subscribed to our free IU basketball email newsletter, especially now that the season has started and we're sending our in-depth post-game analysis emails the morning after every game.
There's a high-level operation going on out there.
And joining is easy. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com.
Make no excuses.
Can we get some basketball, please?
Okay, let's talk some basketball, and let's talk Trayce Jackson-Davis and his recruitment. He made an announcement this week through Corey Evans of Rivals, and I think Jeff Rabjohn's Peegs reported it as well. But the basic quote from the Corey Evans article is, this is from Trayce: "I've officially decided that I'm going to sign late and not early. I'm not ready to make my decision yet." Okay. Now, that's only really an issue because kind of the narrative has been that Indiana's the clear leader. They have all the crystal ball picks. A lot of people thought that this would happen by October. Certainly he'll commit, and sign by the early signing period, and that hasn't happened. And so I think this perception that Indiana was the clear leader and this was going to get done has, kind of made it feel like something has been taken, at least the reaction of some fans, I should say. And it's probably a vocal minority, but it gives the impression that like something has been taken away that we had, when in reality there was never a commitment made and he's just going through the process like he should. So I just want to offer kind of a quick bit of perspective on this, and then Coach and Andy, get your thoughts on it. Number one, he is making the smart decision. If I was someone in his camp, I would tell him to do the exact same thing. He's a 5-star recruit. He has the leverage. He could show up in October for practice without committing or anything, and he will have a spot like at any of his 3 finalists. So there's information he doesn't have. How does Archie develop big men? How does he work with 5-star recruits? What is this program? We're 2 years not having made an NCAA tournament. Are we going to step up and be better as a program? There's a lot of information for him to get to maybe, match the emotional feeling that he may have if he really does, like IU that much. So I would say get all the information. Become more certain with your choice, whether it's Indiana or whoever you choose. I applaud him. I think he's doing the smart thing. And while it would be a huge blow, there's no question, because this is an in-state guy. It's a position of need. We've put a lot of time into him. Don't have a lot of plan B options out there. It's not, and no option B really even comes close. It's not a death knell. There are graduate transfers. There are other transfers. There is spring recruiting. There are other things that could happen that could still put the program in a fine position. None of them would come close to getting Trayce. But for those 2 reasons, I think it's important to obviously respect his decision, to be patient with it, but also not to, even if this doesn't turn out the way that we all want, feel like the sky is falling. But I would also say Archie's got a pretty good track record so far. I'm willing to, obviously keep the trust and just be patient, and let's see where this ends up in the end. Andy, what are your kind of thoughts on this?
To me, I was always surprised that there was, and even, he had talked about trying to make a decision early. That always surprised me. And I say that basically along the same lines as what you were saying before. Like, to me, any 5-star guy should, I don't want to say drag the process out as long as possible, but take as long as you need. It's become more and more rare that those guys announce in the fall. And so the notion that he was going to do that was kind of surprising to me. So this kind of aligns better with, kind of similar to what you said, advice I would give, or just the reality of most 5-star kids. So that, to me, in and of itself isn't concerning. To your point, I think there's a different feeling about it because there was this, belief that he was going to make a decision sooner rather than later. And so, to me, I think any 5-star kid should probably be doing what he's doing. And so you really can't begrudge him for making for taking his time to make a choice that's good. And, Romeo waited till, essentially the 11th hour was really the last one of the very last 5-star guys to commit. it doesn't mean waiting doesn't mean that your initial lean is any different than what it would have been before. But like you said, maybe you need something to reassure that. Maybe you need something else. So that's not to say that he would pick Indiana if he had to pick today, and that he'll pick Indiana in the spring. But I guess I would say is for a guy who, has been tied to someplace for a while, we have a recent example that says waiting doesn't equal disappointment for IU in this situation.
Yeah, look, clearly it's not good, right? Like clearly, if the perception was that Indiana was like the 100% leader and this is going to be a done deal, clearly he's open to other options. And who knows, maybe other big schools will come in. And if they do, he should listen and we should all be happy for him. And, this whole notion of, we're not good enough to commit to you right now. Well, we don't want you anyway. That's the silliest thing that I think I've ever heard. And if you're saying that or you're thinking that, just stop, because that's absurd. Coach, your thoughts on this recruitment?
Well, I just take a different take on it. It's a complex process, and I look at recruiting just to see how Indiana's doing in the game. And I look at it like Indiana's doing really well in the game. They're in the top three. They have Brooks. They're getting a lot of people to look at Indiana, and it seems like there is a methodology to the recruiting as opposed to what's been in the past. To me, that's what's exciting about recruiting. These young men and their families have huge, huge choices to make. And going to college for anyone is a tough decision to make, and you should take the time that you feel is necessary. And then all the crystal ball stuff is fun from fans to watch. But again, a lot of families try to keep that close to the vest, or this player meets with someone from Michigan State media. They're going to say one thing and say another thing. I don't know that everyone that thinks they know where these players are going really has a lot of insight. It's like my neighbor's second cousin's girlfriend saw Trayce at Taco Bell and he was wearing a Michigan State jersey. Some stuff happens and it filters through the social media world. So
someone tweet that, please.
And I understand, because we want from a coaching standpoint, you'd like to have your recruiting set and done early so you don't have any surprises. Because if it doesn't go Indiana's way late, now you are looking at someone a lot less, and you might have missed out on the second option that you wanted. So you've got to balance that, whether you want to wait or not. And for this guy, we're obviously going to wait. But there's some negatives as far as waiting on the program. But I'm not super interested in talking about recruiting right now, because we got a team that's on the floor that's going to be doing some great things that we're all excited about, and control your controllables. I have no control over what Trayce Jackson-Davis is going to do. I have no control over what the Hoosiers can do, and I know it's fun to talk about that stuff, and we need to talk about it, but we need to talk about it in fairness to the young man and his family. And coaching high school athletes, that's a tough decision, whether it's D1, D2, D3, and there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of misunderstandings of what is done at different levels. So I follow it, wish that he would do it, a little bit shocked that he didn't pull the trigger in November from what I've heard, but it's basketball season, and he will make the right decision for him and his family in the right time, in the right amount of time.
Yeah, just a couple quick thoughts. One is we kind of need to get used to this some. Like, if we want to be competing for 5-star recruits and going up against the big boys, we're going to have to be in this for the long haul and get used to some recruitments dragging out into the spring. It is all, and this should make us appreciate, obviously, having a guy like Armand Franklin, there, one of the spots taken by a solid guy that we all think is going to be, a good player. Let's remember that. The other thing, Andy, I guess the last point on this, we used to have a policy on the show of not really talking about recruiting, especially in season, until guys committed. I think we got a little bit lax on that, as the Romeo thing started to get bigger and bigger. But this recruitment has kind of reminded me of why we had that policy, and I think maybe it's time to go back to that.
I'd have no issue reverting back to that as well. And I think, to Coach's point, you've got a team that you're really excited about. And the reality is, if the team plays well this year, then that is likely to mean that Juwan has done well, Romeo has done well. And I think both of those things are impactful to a guy like Trayce Jackson-Davis. Romeo in the sense of what does Archie do with a 5-star, Juwan in the sense of what would he do with somebody who's playing, a front court player who's really talented and versatile. and what do they do? So if the team plays well and we enjoy the season from that standpoint, I think those are positive things that could help Trayce Jackson-Davis make a decision for Indiana. But the reality is it doesn't matter how bad you want him to come. It's ultimately his decision. Whatever he decides is what he thinks is best for him, and who knows what happens from there. So to me, there's nothing that we're going to gain from talking about it until he actually makes a decision, and we'll just enjoy the players that we have already and go from there.
Coach, any final thoughts?
What are Kansas fans thinking when Romeo came to IU? Kansas is top seed right now in most bracket places, and they're moving on. Indiana's going to be wearing the candy stripes next year, whether Jackson-Davis is with us or not, and we're going to be having shows. And that means life is good on my part, as long as we're having conversations with you guys about the great university and a great basketball program. If you want to be here, Trayce, come. If you don't, good luck.
Absolutely. Okay.
I felt like we had an amazing conversation on all levels.
Absolutely. All right, coming up here in our final segment, we will answer your questions, including one about how Indiana should defend Duke, and then another about the danger of looking ahead to Duke and overlooking the importance of the Marquette and Arkansas games. That is next. Stick with us. All right. There we go. We got out of
that feeling
11 minutes.
You know that feeling when you first started dating your significant other and you'd hear them talk? That's how I feel every time you have an Archie Miller drop. just don't tell
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Tonsoni.
Tell the truth. I'm a basketball guy. I know a lot about the game. We have to become a tough, nasty team on defense. They must feel like they're being dominated by Indiana University.
You need a minute, Coach? Are you going to be all right?
Yeah, excuse me. I'll be right back.
Oh, man. All right. So I'm guessing. Let me see how much time we have left here.
All right, I'm gonna go
math
grab water.
time.
I'm gonna go grab water. I'll be right back.
Andy
Hang on.
Lee's
I'll do the
reference.
math. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Max. I'll do the math.
Well, no,
now.
we're at 41:16. So we've got 10:44 left. So we need to be out of here at 10:08. Look at that.
See?
Look at that.
Damn it! You don't even need me anymore. Forget it. I'm leaving.
Wait, what did I just say? 10:08. 10:08. Okay. So I'm guessing we'll probably be able to get through. These two questions are both pretty good. So we'll hit those. Obviously, the rest of these questions that you all sent in, thank you. We'll hit them on Monday in the mailbag, which hopefully Ryan will be here for. Oh, yeah, and then we'll hit Scott's question third if we need a third question. All right. Did you guys have a chance to look at the questions?
I kind of glanced through. I glanced through the first few.
They these two questions pair nicely together.
Yeah.
Coach's version of Sweet Nothings. Oh man, that is awesome. Okay. All right, let's do this.
All right.
Here we go. You're listening to the Assembly Call. We are wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. I am Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni filling in for Ryan Phillips this week. And this week we're taking some questions from the new private IU basketball community that we kind of quietly launched a few weeks back. It already has 753 members and features a lot of intelligent, informed discussion every day about IU basketball, and not to mention a fun live chat during IU games. If you're interested, check it out at assemblycall.com/community. Love to have more excited, enthusiastic IU fans in there with us. So, guys, it is segment 4. That is when we usually answer questions. We've got a bunch of good ones. If you submit a question, we don't get to it. We'll hit it in the Monday mailbag, but we'll get to as many now as we can. This first one is from one of my favorite Twitter handles, Marchie Priller. It says, if you're Archie, do you stick with the pack line defense versus Duke, or do you try to switch defenses throughout the game, maybe play some zone? What defense do you see best fit to keep Zion out of the lane and hope Barrett and company are off from outside? Coach, what is the defense where all 14 players get to play at the same time? That's the defense I'm thinking that we probably want.
It's early in the season, and you are who you are, right? So you're a pack line defensive team. You're going to play the pack line with some adjustments inside that pack line that might not be there for normal to try to slow down what looks like to be an incredible Duke offense. You may see some zone at some time. It just depends. I don't know that this is a must-win for Indiana. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of switching defenses, but there's some stubbornness too at times. Is that this is who Indiana is. We're going to play it. We're going to give you our best. We'll make a scouting report, calls and adjustments as we go. But we're not going to be so afraid of a team that we have to go and be something that we're not. Maybe you'll see more of that multiple defense later at tournament time in order to win the games that you need to keep playing. So it'll be interesting to see. I could see it going both ways. I'm more of a stubborn coach. That's probably why I'm an assistant now, not a head coach. But we were going to play man-to-man regardless of how good the opponents were. We would make some adjustments as far as pressure when we pick up, help side, who we help off, so forth. And here's a thought, too. I think the best defense is an attacking offense. And let's see if those guys can get in foul trouble. They can't score if they're on the bench, and they're going to have to guard our guys, which Duke has not been very good at. They gave up 84 points. And if I had enough time, I was going to do the new offensive-defensive metric in the bracket world. Indiana was over 5.5 to the plus in the first game. So even though that wasn't a nice quality win, that metric does not have a strength of schedule component to it. I was interested to see, even though Duke won.
What is this? What are these numbers?
Differences. It's an offense minus defensive efficiency metric in this new net. It's one of the 5 components.
Okay.
It's supposed to be the second most important. But Indiana had a pretty good result. I calculated it out earlier today. But I didn't have time to figure out Duke's. Force them to play some defense. And even if they're tired or in foul trouble, will they do that? I know they played Kentucky first game, but I think you're going to see adjustments rather than a whole lot of multiple defenses and a offense designed to go after their better players to force them to guard and maybe foul and do some things like that. We're beating Duke.
Andy, your thoughts?
I think, I'd echo what Coach said. I think they got into, particularly their front line, got into a little bit of foul trouble in the first half of that game. And so I do think you have to put pressure on them to actually guard, particularly, Zion. And, the thing defensively for IU and what Duke exploited with Kentucky was that they had Tyler Hero on the floor and he had to guard somebody. And basically whoever he was guarding was just taking him to the hole every single time. And so they got a lot of good shots out of that. I don't know that at this point, based on what we've seen, there's a true kind of weak link that somebody's really going to go after on IU. Now they'll probably have somebody picked out that they might really want to test. Maybe that's Romeo that they really want to test earlier, things like that. But I thought that was there. I think Zion hit a couple, he hit a 3, he hit another, kind of pull up jumper. But if he's taking those shots, those are the shots that you want him to take, and not, try as best as you can to not let him get anything going toward the basket, keep him off the glass and things like that. Although apparently he can just jump over people, as anyone who watched that game learned. That quickly turned from hey, wow, this is awesome, Kentucky's getting routed, to holy crap, when's that IU at Duke game? That's pretty soon. And as another potential defensive strategy, now I want you guys to hear me out. What if you played part of the possession in man, but then wait, then later toward the end you switched into a zone? I know, mind blowing.
That is how you're a champion.
By the way, between trips to the bathroom, Ryan is laughing hysterically at the thought of getting Duke in foul trouble at Cameron. He thinks that's the funniest thing that's ever been said on this show.
That's a valid point. That's
true.
I mean, it sounds great. It sounds great, but you'd have to get him to commit 15 actual fouls to get the 3 or 4 called that would make that happen.
Still got to try, Ryan.
Well,
come on,
got to try. Okay, so this question, which really pairs perfectly with that first question, this is from Joel. With Duke being the game everyone is circling, do you think fans or players understand how important the 2-game stretch with Marquette and Arkansas will be in the maturity of this team? It's very possible that IU could be 2-2 to start the season. And look, that's, not a real pleasant thought to have, but it certainly is possible. The offense is struggling a little bit. Obviously, Indiana's going to have to put up some points to beat Marquette. You're at home, so you have that advantage there. And then Arkansas, you're going on the road. We don't know how some of these guys are going to respond on the road. So those are two very, very losable games. I don't think we're going to lose both of them. I would not at all be shocked if we go 1-1 there, though. My guess, Coach, is it doesn't really matter what we as fans talk. We can look ahead to the Big Ten tournament if we want to. It'd be dumb, but we could do that. All that matters is
no IU fan is looking forward to the Big Ten tournament in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly. All that matters is what the team and the players are doing, and I think we can all rest pretty comfortably that Archie has them focused wholeheartedly on Montana State right now. Then it'll be Marquette, and there won't be a whole lot of Duke talk until that's the next game on the schedule.
Yeah, but the question's, I think, a solid question because those are the two best opponents early on, and I think that will show us what type of Indiana team we have. I just think that in the two games that we have seen, the exhibition and the first game, the second exhibition that we saw, I thought you saw a team that was focused and locked in and probably better than we think. And there's two thought process. As a fan, we think Indiana is really, really good, talented, and that. But we're also nervous for the last 6 years or so. We've been up and down, and how are we judging this season? You have Marquette at home. In the most of Indiana seasons, that's a win. I don't care how good Marquette is. That's a win, and we were all confident about it. We're all a little gun-shy. We're all a little bit nervous about the big games not going our way. And I think that I'm starting to get, until the games are played, a little bit more comfortable in thinking that Marquette's going to have to come into Assembly Hall and beat Indiana. And Arkansas, I think, with losing 4 starters is it's on the road. You're always worried about that. But I do think that question is a great question. If we come out of that 2-0, that is really a great signal. Losses in that then slow the progress. So I do think those two games are vitally important to play well, and always you want to win and play well and learn lessons from victories in those areas. So I think they're maybe even more important than Duke, because Duke's so good. You could probably go in there and play well, and whether you get in foul trouble, Ryan, or not, it could be a 20-point maybe. It's just they're that good. So, yeah, I think these two games are very important. We're beating Duke.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, from a bracketology perspective, when I ranked the games, I think I had Marquette second and the Arkansas game fourth, just in terms of importance, where those could shake out when the season's over. And I think ultimately those are probably more important than Duke because they have a feeling of being winnable right now, where I think anybody could watch that Duke game, despite what your sound drop from Coach, from the offseason, those are games that IU can feasibly win. And the Duke game, could they come out and shock everybody? Maybe. But that to me is a house money game where anything that happens there is gravy if it's good. And if you lose, then you lost to Cameron. So what? So I think in that regard, it's really positive. And I think those are the ones that I don't take those lightly, because I think those are the ones we first start to actually learn more about this team in those settings. And I think they'll be big tests for different reasons. 1, a really good offense. 2, first road test. So I certainly am not looking past those. The Duke game is exciting, but those games are ones that I think IU has a far better shot of actually winning.
Yep. All righty. Well, that will have to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat
mobbers,
join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. I hit the wrong music. Hate it when that happens. You can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again tomorrow night, Friday night, for the IU Montana State postgame show. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. And we will fill the rest of this extra time with Ryan drops.
It's completely ridiculous. Come on, dude. This was the most ridiculous ordeal of my life.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
There we go. All right. That's how we fill time. Hit the wrong song. Okay.
Oh, well. What are you going to do?
It happens.
Yeah.
So episode 100, that's how we celebrate.
First mistake out of the whole time.
Yes, the first one.
It gets all sorts of wacky.
Yes. So tomorrow
night it's me and Coach. Is that correct?
You and Coach. Yep.
And is Ryan going to be there if he feels well enough, or was he out on that one?
No, he was out for that one. Either way, he's got to pick up his mom at the airport.
Oh, that's right.
He's got to pick up his parents at the airport.
Okay.
So I'll get a run sheet together and get everything over to you.
Okay. And maybe resend me the stuff for your Zoom account, because I always have to log out of it after I've done it so that it doesn't screw up when I get back in when I'm not hosting.
Okay.
So.
I will. All right. So we have now a very special guest to join us here. Let's bring Valerie on. We did a test earlier, and there she is. Now you're muted right now. Let me unmute you, which has been harder for me to do since my computer updated and things aren't working right. There we go. You are unmuted. Valerie, welcome to the assembly call. It is awesome to have you on here.
Thank you. It's awesome to be on.
Very nice. Very nice. So we let's see here. I didn't get a chance to read you. You sent me some information earlier today so people can kind of get to know you as an Indiana fan. So we asked you about your favorite player, your favorite Indiana player. Do you want to tell us? And you listed two of them. So who are you want to tell us about your two favorite IU players?
Well, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so I was a Bob Knight is God sort of Hoosier. So
that audio drop is coming back at some point later.
So I was a big Kent Benson fan. I'm not sure why, but I always enjoyed watching him. But clearly nowadays I'm a big Vic Oladipo fan, and I thank the heavens above that he's back here in Indianapolis, and I get to see him play a couple times a year. In fact, my nephew was at the game the other night when he made that really great clutch shot. And
oh man, where the net didn't even move.
That was a gift from me, and I'm like,
that is awesome.
But yeah, I like, because I've seen Vic develop, so
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, thank you so much for all of your support, over the years, your support of emails, just, obviously your loyalty and listening and showing up in the chats. But I mean, the other thing, which I know I talked about before on a show, but this, which you sent over, which is just like one of the most thoughtful things ever, which if you can't see that there, it's Juwan Morgan autograph, which you got at Hoosier Hysteria. Was just to know that you were kind of thinking about us, in that moment when you're there. That kind of stuff just means a lot. Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that keeps us so motivated, enthusiastic. So thank you for being such a
you're welcome.
Well, person.
If I could steal a second, I just want to say that I owe you guys, Coach and Andy and Jerod and Ryan, and sometimes Chronic is on, and everyone in the chat mob. I read what everybody says, and I feel like I'm part of the family. I don't chat a lot because I watch on my iPad, and it's kind of hard to. You guys go a lot faster than I can poke in, and I listen because my husband listens as well. So that's, he's not back here now. He's watching on his iPad, probably laughing at. The past 3 years of my life have been very stressful, and you guys have really been important to getting me through because I'm a part-time caregiver, and
Mm-hmm.
basketball is my refuge. And the fact that you guys have been on all summer has just been great.
Well, thank you for telling us that. It is, as we've mentioned on the show sometimes, there are kind of those moments where we question ourselves, like, we're just sitting here talking into a computer after watching college kids play a basketball game. But as we've, as we talk about ourselves, and as we're learning more and more here as we do events like these and get to meet people like you and talk with people like you, there's obviously something about it that means much more than that brings us all here, whether we're watching this podcast or watching the games, and just that connection of IU basketball. So that's we're very happy to be that and to be part of your Indiana experience. So I appreciate you telling us that.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things about podcasts, the ones that, some of the ones that I listen to where it's like people you've never met before, but you feel like you have eventually learned quite a bit about them. So I think people are probably know more about us than they thought they needed to or cared to.
They certainly know more about Ryan than they
not as much as we know, apparently. So
that's true.
I was kind of looking forward to Ryan being on tonight because I can rant like the best of them.
Ooh, okay. Well, do you have a rant? I mean, we didn't have a rant because Ryan wasn't here. Is there something that you want to rant about? Because now's the time to do it.
Well, I didn't prepare anything.
Well, he doesn't either. So.
Oh, well.
If you just play the hits. If you kind of run into a rut, you're like, well, what should I do? Well, Coach K, people still like that. I'll just circle back around to that guy, So just pick an old one that you think will resonate well. That's fine.
My old ones you probably don't want to hear about. My husband doesn't want to hear about them. He's watching, so I'll spare you.
So you told this great story. Do you want me to read this, or do you want to tell us the story of 1987 watching Keith Smart make the shot?
Yeah, I was a graduate student, and I was living in Eigenman, the graduate dorm, and it's very different living in a graduate dorm because there are so many people from so many different countries of all different ages. It's a global community. And, when we go to the cafeteria to eat, you have everybody in their little corners of the room eating. But when the final game was on, the whole dorm was in every one of the television rooms watching the final game. And, people that I would never have expected to be in there were in there. And, when Keith hit the final shot, I mean, like, people were hugging each other. It was like a global experience. It was really neat because this little Asian girl just hugged me, and it was really neat. But then, because I'm Hoosier born and bred, and I just gotta do all the Hoosier stuff. I grew up not too far from Bloomington, so I'm going down 10th Street, and the traffic was just at a standstill, and people were hanging out, get high five, and you were just slapping everybody's hands. And I made my way to Showalter Fountain. By that time, the fish were gone, of course. And, I got several random hugs and kisses from guys. So
that's awesome.
It was fun. And I forgot to mention that the next morning when I got up, somebody had spray painted Keith Smart for president on the dumpster across from the dorm. So I saw that every day till I graduated. So
that's pretty much Bloomington.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And what's really funny is during the summer I was in the dorm, and I was down getting dinner one night, and it's like I was just minding my own business, and I looked up and there's Keith Smart and Dean Garrett, and I'm like, Oh my God. I was just like, I was so awestruck I couldn't even say anything.
Wow.
So,
Now, Coach,
I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore in '87, and drove
oh, you
toward.
mean I'm older than you, Coach?
Nope. I took like 10 years before I went to college.
Oh, okay.
I also was on 10th Street, and I might have been that guy hanging out of the car. At some point, I jumped out of the vehicle and ran down to Showalter Fountain and had various hugs and kisses. So your husband's watching, so maybe we didn't meet that night or nothing. But that was a great experience.
You know what's funny? I remember Coach telling that story when we got together at the meetup last year, and immediately in my head when Valerie said that, I was like, well, and I saw the look on his face. I was like, well, you never know.
Oh, that is great, man. You know, those stories are always so special. It's always so great hearing people's stories of those epic moments. You know, we gotta have more of those in Bloomington. More people need to experience that.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this year's team so far?
Well, I missed the exhibition game because I wasn't feeling well, but I've went to the game the other night. And I got really tired of all the fouls. I thought they were a little ridiculous. I mean, just I don't know, but
the officials are not who you were there to see at the game. Is that what? Okay, that's
exactly. Yeah,
funny how that works out.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, and but what I saw was a little sloppy.
Yeah,
I thought
to be expected.
And yeah, that's to be expected. Let's see. I was kind of hoping to see a little bit more of Demise that night because in the exhibition game he had done really well, but
yeah, he didn't get quite as many looks in the Chicago State game as he did in the second half of that exhibition game.
I don't watch Romeo a lot because everybody else does. So I watch the other players because I like to see people develop.
Yeah.
And I think we've touched on this before. You know, I like the guys that stay 4 years and really grow, and you get to know them and their family. And you know, I don't like the one and done culture at all.
Yeah.
But I do watch the other guys that I think are going to be around a while. And so I really like Rob Phinisee. And I do have, this is going to sound weird, but I have affinity, and I've told Jerod this, that I have affinity for the guys that have weird hair because that really upsets my dad. When my dad is, well, if you can see the picture back here, my dad was in the Navy with the crew cut back in the
yeah.
So you know, he's just like, they need a haircut. So
yeah.
You know,
So you're still
the Jake Forster cut is not in his wheelhouse. Is that what you're describing to us?
And when Demise pulls his hair up in the ponytail, I was really upset the other day after the game when my dad didn't say anything about either one of them.
Oh man, that's great. That is great. Well, Valerie, this has been awesome. I'm so glad you came on with us. I'm so glad that we were able to do this. Obviously, the next step is to meet in person and have these chats in person, which we've missed each other the last couple times, but we got to make that happen when we're up there this year.
Yeah. Let me know, and I'll definitely make it happen this year.
Do you have any words of wisdom for the folks in the chat mob who are watching as we continue to, you know, kind of embark on this season, and, you know, temperatures are going to rise and enthusiasm is going to be high, but do you have any words of wisdom for folks as we go through this season?
Words of wisdom?
Yeah, or another rant. I felt like there was a rant about officiating that was just ready to burst out.
Oh Lord. Well, I think Chronic went on about it on Twitter, didn't he? He said something about it, but no, I'm not going to rant because when I rant, I get in trouble. But
I want that to be Ryan's answer one night.
She's afraid of the sound drop. That's what she's afraid of.
Is that it? Oh no.
No, sometimes words come out that I don't want to. Well,
that's okay. This isn't live on the radio anymore. This is just YouTube.
I know it's
so
not.
anything goes now. This is AC After Dark. This is the show that harbors Ryan Phillips. So
and the daughter of a sailor. So that's all I'm going to say. Okay. But I just I would really I would love to see the stands full because I really if you get a chance to go, if use SeatGeek and get yourself some good seats.
That's right.
And get in the hall because we need those seats full this year, and I think that we are going to do good. I really feel the enthusiasm in the hall. People just seem to this lighter feeling as opposed to last year. I think people's expectations were too high last year. So
probably because some idiot podcasters were talking about how that should be a 21 or 22 win team who shall remain nameless.
That was our off-season performance, leading into last season is really a cautionary tale for many, where
it's
maybe, as you said, maybe don't talk yourself into like the idealized version of every player hitting at the exact same time and culminating in a magnificent season. Because
it is forever a blight on the credibility of the show.
How it works out.
Yes.
Well, back in the 80s and the 70s and 80s, at the height of that era that you loved, that's when I grew up on Indiana basketball and attended my most games when I was in college. There was a feeling in Assembly Hall unlike none other, and it's hard to explain that there was just a quiet confidence before the game, during the game, even down double digits at some point. It was just our place. And that's been missing for a while. And we've had a couple of years where maybe that came back. But I long for that feeling of just quiet cockiness or confidence where this is Indiana blue blood. I long for that. Am I remembering that right? Would you agree?
I would agree. I think it wasn't just inside the hall. I think it was inside the state, or at least in Southern Indiana. Just that you always went in to every game thinking we're going to win. And, just the quiet confidence, feeling good about your team and your coach and for all his faults. And it also helped that I grew up with I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of his name. Jack Butcher, the high school winningest coach in Indiana. So like I've got basketball blood running through my veins. So, I had confidence in high school, in my high school team. I had confidence in my college team. So, it was just a statewide thing. It was a Hoosier thing. It's a Hoosier thing.
Yeah, when Martha the Mop Lady would come on Channel 4, Martha the Mop Lady, it was a night. Sit down and get going.
Martha the Mop Lady. I mean, when they play Martha the Mop Lady before, I mean, there's so many people going, what is that? And I'm like, it's Martha. I love Martha the Mop Lady.
Sometimes, Val, in the middle of the summer, I'll just play that on a loop on YouTube. just for kicks because it's just
he drives around the neighborhood with the windows down, the subwoofers going, and bumping into Martha.
That's right.
Yeah. It was very growing up in the 60s and 70s in Indiana, because I went to a high school so small. We didn't have a football team. I know nothing about football, really.
Lagodi
Lagodi
High School?
Yeah. That's where I went.
Winners
go to
Lagodi.
You know everything about me.
Yep. Winners go to Lagodi.
Oh, man. That is... By the way, Josh Wilson, fellow chat mobber, wrote a really nice piece for Hoosiers United. It wasn't a nice piece. It was a well-written piece, but it was scathing about the fan support at the Chicago State game. He was not happy that the fans were empty, said the energy was kind of low. Now,
it was.
You're playing Chicago. The competition isn't very good. You would expect that's not encouraging to hear, but do you think that's just, people bored with these games against sub-350 KenPom teams, or is that a sign that maybe there's a lot of enthusiasm here in our little bubble of, people who listen to podcasts and stuff? Is it maybe not quite as – is the excitement maybe not quite as widespread in Bloomington and around there as we think, and it's going to take some more winning to bring all the people back all the time?
Well, being at the crossroads of America, I live in Indianapolis, for folks that don't know that. I get to see everybody's gear. So I kind of, there's a lot more Purdue gear than I've seen in a long time. So, so there are a lot of people here that have kind of gone to the dark side, and you see a lot of Kentucky gear up here. I can't believe it. It's
shameful.
It is. Well, it is. And I do shame them too. Are you from Indiana?
Well, congratulations. I got to run. I got another podcast.
Thank you. It was nice meeting
congratulations. Nice meeting you again, I think, maybe. I had to find the nicest looking lady. Take care, everyone.
See you, Coach.
Yeah.
Beer, cheese curds, and music. It doesn't get any better.
Okay.
Yeah, I like cheese curds too.
Man, all those people with their Kentucky gear. Well, hopefully as the season goes and more excitement will build, and we'll see some better turnouts as the competition gets better.
Yeah. I think it will. I think it will. I think the Marquette game will be full.
Oh yeah, I think so. I
think
we'll get a good atmosphere for that one.
And I think if they do good after Marquette, the fan base will. But yeah, it's the students I really worry about. But it's kind of funny. I think because I'm a season ticket holder, every time I go to the hall, somebody different sits next to me. And I kind of wonder if people are buying season tickets just to sell them and make some money off of them. And
probably some of that. Especially for games like Chicago State, people probably try to sell their tickets for those games.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like, there's different people around me every game, and I feel like there just isn't the continuity that there was at one time. So that may be part of the problem. And I did mention it to Fred Glass once, who I found out his wife was a cheerleader at Lagodi. So
oh really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember her. I was very small, but yeah.
Well, last question for you. Is there anything that we can do better for you in terms of our coverage of IU basketball, or anything that you wish we talked about more, that we talked about less, that we did more, that we did less? But, our longtime listeners like you, we greatly respect your opinions. And
No,
no,
anything is. I'm.
You're ready. You're ready for your IU basketball talk.
I'm ready. I'm ready for everything.
That's why you're awesome.
Like I told you, the only reason I have a Twitter account is I follow IU basketball. It's pathetic, and
No.
it's like I'm always sending messages to my brother, my husband, and my nephew, who are also IU fans. Oh, guess what? So and so decommitted today, and
That's the only reason I use Twitter anymore is IU basketball. I don't even really use my personal account anymore.
Yeah, if you can scale back Twitter to the point where you only can see the stuff that you care about and not get caught up in the crossfire of various other topics and discussions, then you're doing it right.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, Valerie, this was awesome. Thank you for joining us. Wonderful to talk to you, and hopefully we will see you in March when we're up there.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right,
Cool.
Sounds good.
Thanks,
Valerie.
All right, so I think, hang on one second here, Andy.
Okay.
Yes, we're not recording anymore. You can turn your space heater back on. So you got things tomorrow night. I'll send you the run sheet and all the instructions and everything. I had another question. Oh, next Thursday night, can you host AC Radio if I can't be here?
That's so far away.
I know it is. It's a long time from now.
I'm gonna week to week.
You can tell me later. We don't have to plan
right now. I should be. Just let me make sure of one other thing. Hang on.
Oh,
I can look on my phone. So, that's the 15th. Yeah, we're good. We have parent teacher conference, but it's early, so.
Well, the other thing, and this one actually may be bigger, is, and because I like that, I could potentially do that one, but Sunday against Arkansas could be a problem because Heather's going to be out of town, so it's just me and Birdie, and I'm still not sure if my parents can come down, and my daughter. So I might need you to host that one on Sunday if you can, because if there's not someone who can be here to, trying to watch the game and host the show with her, that would be
okay.
That would be quite a task.
That would be fun. Yeah. When is that? That's next Sunday?
That's next Sunday, yeah, mid-afternoon. It should be good, but I think my parents can come down. But
yeah, let me look and just make sure Mallory doesn't have a game. I don't think she does. But she's on this Sunday, but I think not next Sunday. But let me look.
Again, hopefully I'll be good for both of them, but there's potential issues there.
So that'd be Sunday the 18th then?
Yes, Sunday the 18th, midday.
She plays Saturday, but not Sunday. As of now, I think I would be okay.
Okay, and I'm working to make sure that I can.
Okay,
but
yeah, just keep me posted.
Just to know in case they can't come.
So then tomorrow, we'll do it on here. There's really not a great way for me to do intro or outro music, which for the radio show is not a huge deal.
For the post-game show, you mean?
Yeah, well, which in the past for the radio is not a huge deal. I know we got to leave kind of gaps in space, but we'll just kind of just do it without it on here. I think that should be fine.
Yeah, just leave a gap like before. Leave like 4 or 5 second gap so they can pause it on the radio, and then I'll compile it all together because I'll get home tomorrow night, and then I'll compile it all together.
Okay.
So yeah,
we should be good. I should be home right around when it would start. So I'm just gonna set the DVR. I'll get caught up when I get home if I'm a little bit behind, but I'll still be able to watch all of it. So we should be good. So and it's just me and Coach. He's the only other person I should look for, right?
Yep, just you and Coach. Okay. So you both got the link and everything. It should be the same link. So yeah, should be good.
That'll work.
Sweet. All righty.
All right,
Thank you for everybody who continued watching our episode planning session.
Oh yeah. Hopefully everybody really enjoyed that. This is how the sausage gets made. Really interesting stuff.
Yes.
Basically, Jerod asking me things, me having no idea what's going on, and guys working through it.
Yes. And really, send tweets to Ryan. Let's pick him up, make him feel better.
Yeah, definitely.
It was Chinese food. We'll just leave it at that.
Yes.
That was the culprit. So,
all right. Sounds good. Well, I will talk to you, I guess, Wednesday, right? Marquette's Wednesday.
Oh, crap, yeah. Yeah, Marquette on Wednesday. Oh, I guess that's the other thing is, do you want to do a preview for the Marquette game for Banner Monday? You want to record it ahead of time?
Probably could. We could do it like Sunday night if that works.
All right, we'll figure it out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just like text me or something over the weekend. We'll figure that out.
Okay.
Both kids have basketball games like late afternoon Sunday, so I'm missing one of them because I can't be two places at once. Surprisingly. So
you gotta work on that.
Yeah, I will. So we could do it early afternoon, maybe. I'm going on that one, whatever that other Marquette podcast that sent me an email. I'm doing that in the morning on Sunday. So
being involved, Dad.
Ryan.
Yeah. Good advice. Good advice. Hey, between the two of them, they have 5 basketball games, and I'll be at 4 of them. So, and the only reason I can't be one is at the same time I have to coach one. So, doing my best, Ryan. Jeez.
This overly super involved dad.
Man, can't win with that guy.
You're just a straight liar.
There's so many like deep cuts, and I haven't found a place to use them. They're really good.
My parents are lovely human beings.
Oh God! All right,
Okay,
I gotta.
It's time to go. See
All
you,
right,
everybody.
I'll see you.